So I think I know the answer for some people. Who is doing continuous integration with their mobile apps right now? Who's using continuous integration automated builds for their mobile apps right now? Yeah, actually, half the people, cool. So I have two goals for tonight, this being specific to Android. I never want someone to have to create an APK manually again, whether it's running a Gradle command or exporting it through Android Studio, whatever it is. No, that's for the birds. After tonight, no more. And I never want you to have to touch an APK again. You should be able to go straight from code to Google Play without touching anything. Do those seem like lofty goals, ambitious goals, things we can do in about 8 minutes?
10?
Okay, 10 minutes. Well, I'll take 10 minutes. So there's a handful of problems that we try to solve with continuous integration. There's a lot of things that really productive teams value. Productivity, when you see, like the comic strip says, if your code is building and compiling, you're going to context switch and you're going to jump over to Twitter or Facebook, or you're going to go sword fight out in the hall on office chairs. Whatever it is, it's taking you away from doing, the really valuable stuff. Being able to create high quality software is something I think that we can all strive for. When something gets broken, it's kind of nice to know about it, and versus it's kind of hanging out over on the side. And we like to ship early and ship often, and we want to make it as easy as possible to do that. So when you run an Android build, it takes a few minutes to go through and actually build everything. If you add in static analysis, like running the lint tool to go through and find a lot of common bugs, or you add automated tests in, all of those start kind of ramping up the time it takes to do this, and that's time that you're not spending coding. Let's try to avoid that and find something that can do that work for us. Every time we make a code change, and it amplifies, if a developer is working on multiple branches, you've now a larger factor. And when you add in multiple people on a team, it's a larger factor. These are all new opportunities for issues to get introduced. And issues in code are bad. We try to prevent them, or at least know about them early. So we'd like to know, as soon as possible when something has happened where our code no longer behaves the way we expect, or builds, or whatever it is, whatever metric we're looking for that we define high quality software as. If something breaks and no one tells you, it's probably not going to get fixed. If you have a leaky faucet or a leaky pipe in your house, in your basement, and you never go down to your basement, you're building a swimming pool. Same type of thing with this. If you've got all these bugs over here and no one is telling you, you're gonna miss them and you're gonna ship them. So it'd be nice if everyone on the team had something that would let everyone know, here's the status of where we're at. Creating an APK, logging into Google Play, going through and updating this process and figuring out where their internal test track is, and all that stuff sucks. You usually end up trying to or at least I try to find myself trying to get a build out to a client, and it's like Friday afternoon, and I'm trying to get as much stuff in as I can, and it's I want this to build faster so I can be done and close my laptop for the weekend. Never happens. So then you end up either not shipping something, which is not getting feedback and not figuring out if your software is valuable, or you end up at 5:45 on a Friday afternoon when you wanted to be done 3 hours ago because you're waiting on a build. So the solution to that is make something else do all that work for us. So how do we solve all those problems? So there's an engineering practice called continuous integration, why we're here. It's basically says, I want to take all the code that I'm writing and exercise it as frequently as I possibly can, reasonably can. It helps with communication, helps with automation, helps with productivity. I stole that quote off of a ThoughtWorks website. The tool that I think does this really, really well is called BitRise, or it's a service. The really nice thing is you can get started for free. I'm not getting paid a commission with referrals. I'm paying for it, and it's an awesome service, but you can get started for free. No matter what platform you're using, Android, iOS, Flutter, React Native, we're using it for some backend system and automating deploys to Firebase hosting and App Engine and things like that. It's got a fantastic developer experience. If you're not totally sold on being able to do all this in the cloud, and you still want to run this on your own local servers, they take all of their tasks and expose it through a command line tool that you can run locally. So you still get all of the benefits of developer experience things I'll show you in a minute without needing to use their service. So it's kind of a compromise. But after this, I think you'll want to use their service. So a typical non-trivial process that you might follow with every time you push up code. Let's run lint. If lint is a tool, it'll go through and find a bunch of common issues with your project. If it finds something that is really severe, you can tell it, don't continue, just fail the build right there. It'll also generate a report for you of here's all the warnings, things I found that you might want to go look at. Same thing with unit tests. If we've invested in putting all of these checks together, let's make sure that they're actually getting run. And if they're not meeting their expectations, don't let the software build anymore. Who has tried to build an Android app and get ready to release it, and you go through the entire build process only to realize that you forgot to update the version code? Yeah, exactly. Yep. So it'd be nice if we didn't have to ever do that again. You can go through and build the app, which takes a few minutes, and then signing it, and you've got to make sure you know where all the keys are at and they're secure, and you might put them in version control or you might not. So then you end up with an APK that's release ready. Then you have to go log into the Google Play Developer Console and let's deploy it somewhere. And all along the way, if anything fails, we want to know about it. We can do this in just a few minutes. To get there, having your project in a version control system is not a prerequisite to releasing your app, but you should really be doing it anyway. If you're putting an app in production, make sure it's in version control. You need to have access to the signing and upload credentials for your app. So the Google Play signing key or their upload key if you're using their new Google Play signing. And you need to have at least one release that you've put up onto Google Play. You'll have to do this one manually. And then there's a bunch of checkboxes that they'll have over on the side that are initially gray. Just make sure that those all turn green. And these are all things that you'll have to do before you launch your app anyway. So you can't avoid those. Specific to getting this project set up, or your project set up, you'll need to go into the Google Play Developer Console and either attach a Google Cloud project or create one and associate it to the Android app on the Developer Console. There's no cost to it. They use it to manage service accounts. Once you have that project created, you can go through and create a service account. This is the credentials that will be used, or the account that will be used when it's actually deploying something to a Google property. You need to make sure it's given the project owner role. I think that there's a less permissive role you can give it. I haven't found it yet. And it'll give you a private key that you can download, and you'll take that private key, and we'll use that in a second. You need to let it know that I want to be able to push up project or push up Android builds, so you need to turn on the Android Management API and then you go back to the developer console and turn on the release manager role for that newly created account. It sounds like a lot of stuff. The link there covers everything. It only takes 2 or 3 minutes, but GCP is not super intuitive to navigate, so, but there is good documentation around it, and they try to make it as straightforward as possible. So, live demo. We're going to see if the demo gods are friendly tonight. Fortunately, I'm not running a whole lot of code on my laptop. Unfortunately, this demo is dependent upon a live system, a live service that I don't control. So if things go south, not my fault. So let's see. So to start with, I've built an Android app. It is a super boring Android app that is called the About app. It is an About screen, an entire app that's an About screen. It will print out the version code, and whether or not it's a debug or a release build. You know, all stuff straight out of build config in the manifest. The code for it, there's the layout file for it. It's just text fields. And then the source code for it is literally find view ID and set it to some string for 3 methods. This is the smallest Android app I've built in a long time, but it will serve our purposes for tonight well. All the code is checked into GitHub. Let's jump out of here. Just under Patrick Hammond, Android, About app. No magic. And I've already done the prerequisite work of getting it set up on Google Play Console. I've released one build earlier today just to make sure things are still working, or things were working. So we go to app releases on my internal test track, version code 6. So proof that things are getting deployed out there. But I want version 7. So let's set that up. So when you create an account with BitRise, they'll take you to their developer console or to their console. And when you get logged in, you're obviously not going to have any apps set up. So let's start with that. We're going to add in a new Android app. And I'm going to set a timer because we're going to see how long this takes. I want to add it to my account. I want to make it a private app. Can everyone see this? Yep. Hit next. I want to associate it to my GitHub project and the Android About app. I don't have to worry about dealing with the SSH key negotiation or anything like that. I just push a button and they'll take care of it. I want to build off the master branch. So and now they're going to go through and actually try to pull down my project to make sure they have access to it. And they're also going to figure out what type of project that this is. If it's a Flutter app, they'll figure it out. If it's an iOS app, they'll figure it out. If it's an Android app, they'll figure it out. It takes a second for them to get going, and sure enough, they automatically figured out this is an Android app. They know that there's one module in the app called app. Hit next. Variant. I want to build the release variant. Hit next. All of these look good. Just confirming settings. Confirm. They'll even go through and pick out the app icon that I had with my app as the icon to use on their console. So let's use that one. And anytime I push up code, it'd be really awesome if GitHub would tell BitRise, hey, there's new code out here, go pick it up and rebuild it. So go ahead and register a webhook. And then they're super nice, and they kick off a build for you automatically. So right now, we're a minute and 50 seconds into this. So this will run, and it'll take a minute or two to run. It basically goes through, starts up the environment, pulls down all the code. We'll actually go through and build it. So what is it actually building? So when you jump into here, they've got a bunch of settings in here. The one, you'll spend most of your time in two screens. Builds, which is a running list of here's what's been built, and workflow, which is where you get to customize the behavior of what gets done. So whenever it comes through and builds it, it's going to clone my repository, install anything from the Android SDK that's not there, run lint on my project, and run unit tests on my project. Who's super disciplined and runs lint and unit tests before they release their app? Yep.
Release it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so one person. So by default, they've got you set up with some good best practices in here. This is still running. Let's see what it's up to. So it's actually going through right now and installing some Android tooling that doesn't exist. Doesn't matter, we can go back, and we're not going to context switch and go out into the hall and play on the chairs with swords. We're going to keep working. There's a handful of things we'd like to do otherwise. So let's add in a new step. We're going to eventually want to sign the Android app. We'll come back to that. And we're going to want to build. So we're going to pick the Android build step. And we're going to get fancy, and we're going to deploy to Google Play. 1, 2, 3, 4. So if we're going to build our app, and this is going to create the release version of our app, it knows basically everything. The module, we're going to set, it'd be really awesome if we had a variable for that. And sure enough, if we go down here, there is a module variable that's already set up. And there's a variant variable. How do those exist? When we created our project initially, it asked us for some default values. And we're going to set our build type to be the new bundles and hit save. So if you look up here, we've got a handful of tabs. We've got code signing, secret environment variables, and public or visible environment variables. We've got one up here defined module and one that's defined variant that are the values that we set earlier. Let's go back to our workflow. Let's sign our Android build. So it needs all these things, and if it's like highlighted in orange, it's probably going to be a required value. Whenever you create and release your Android app, you have to create a key store that goes along with it that basically says, I'm going to sign this app and say that this really did come from me. So if we jump over to code signing, they've already got a place in here because they know it's an Android app that we should have an Android key store file. Fortunately for me, I have my upload key store file right here. Let's drag it over, uploading it, and then they give us a bunch of new variables by default. So our key store password, Android is awesome, upload, Android is awesome. If we go back to our workflows, Android signing it, it already is referencing the variables that we set up when we dragged and dropped our key store up there. I don't think we have to do anything else on this one. Deploy to Google Play. Package name, this will be com.atomicrobot.about. The AppRise path, or the paths it'll look for, it'll find those. We're going to set the track. I want to publish it to the internal test track, not the alpha channel. And that should be it. And hit save. So if we run this, it'll fail for two reasons. One, to deploy to Google Play, all that work that we did before, where we went to Google Play console and created the service account, we need to give BitRise, or let BitRise know how to authenticate with Google that this is the account that we're going to use to send builds up. If we jump over to code signing, 1 second, there's a variable we want to grab. Okay. Jump back over to code signing. They've got this generic file store down here, which is a place that you can securely place extra files. Whenever you generate your Surface account on the Google Cloud Platform, you'll get a chance to create a private key. It'll download as a JSON file. We're going to take that and drag it over. And we're going to call it CI/CD key. Perfect. And now we have a variable called BitRise.io CI/CD key. For every build, it'll generate a different URL to access this file, so you get some security out of it. Going back over to workflows, to deploy it, let's pick a variable and go to the bottom. BitRise.io CI/CD key URL. There we go. Save. So what's the one thing that we've forgotten to do so far? Updating the version code. This is where on a Friday afternoon, I would make it all the way through the build and try to release it and end up swearing a lot because I have to go back and change the version code. So before we do any of this stuff, let's add in version code. There's a step for that. And sure enough, it'll update the version code to be the build number. So this will constantly increment the build number every time code changes. It keeps track in the project of here's the last number, or here's the last job number that was run.
Does it change the creative files?
Yeah.
They'll make a push to your GitHub.
Nope. Because I was doing stuff earlier, I need to change the version number to start with. So if I go to settings, your next build number will be 10 because I had 1 through 8 this morning. So right now we're at 10 minutes and we have our entire process set up. Let's go ahead and see if all of it works. And this is where we're going to figure out if the demo gods are happy with us. I can either push code up to the GitHub project, which then would automatically trigger a build. Or if you want to, you can always hit start and you leave it in all the defaults and hit start build. So they'll go through and actually take all of the steps that we just built and all the configuration and start running through it. This should take about 5 minutes, which is about a third of the time it would take me doing this manually, and I don't have to watch it. So we can follow along with the logs, but it's basically going to be doing all the same stuff that it was doing before.
When you push up to the GitHub or Bitbucket or whatever, this tool will see that it's changed in the cloud and trigger it?
Yep. So
you don't have to go through this tool to trigger, so you just come back, you push to the cloud, you come here, it's done.
Yep. It's entirely passive. So when you push up to GitHub or Bitbucket, Bitbucket will let these other people know, hey, something has changed, and you've got new work to go do.
Cool. We've got pull requests set up on the project. We're doing it so you can't merge in a PR until after the build is passed.
Yep. So once you get things kind of set up in here and running, it's entirely passive. You can just sit back and watch all of your code get built without, well, ideally you don't even have to watch it. You'll just, if it doesn't work, you'll get an email, saying, hey, this build failed to run. So right now it looks like it's running lint for the release variant, which is perfect. Going through, it looks like it's building the app. So we'll let this continue to go for a minute. it'll take another 3 minutes, and by that time, my stopwatch will be 15 minutes. So 15 minutes worth of work to not have to spend 15 minutes constantly building an app. That'll start paying dividends pretty quickly. It's running all my unit tests for me, and it'll start doing all these other things too that we set up. I'm sure that there's something that I forgot to set, so I'm watching this. There we go. So missing required input, manifest file, when trying to update the version code. Let's just see what's going on. So there's no default value for that. But it will be under app Android manifest.xml. So the version number will pull it from an environment variable.
Next, the two down from that, this is required there.
I think that I have pulled in the wrong task. There's another one out there that'll actually do things correctly. So it's version, change Android version code and version name. Is this the one I had earlier? Yeah, so different variables. So this one will know where the Gradle file is. If I want to change the version name, it'll do that. If I want to change the version code, it'll do that. So one of the things is when you're adding in all these tasks, sometimes things get duplicated. Like there's 2 tasks out there that you can pull in that do the same thing. This one will work because I had it running earlier. But whenever you have a build that doesn't pass, you get logs as to what's going on, and you get a big scary red X that says you got something to go work on. If I pulled up my email, and sure enough, it says BitRise Android About app failed to build. So within seconds of something happening, of a code change getting pushed up, where I have all that context still in my head, we can go back in and fix things. So I fixed the workflow configuration, so let's try this again. Does anyone have any questions so far?
I have a question about the speed of this process versus on your local machine. Is it faster, slower?
Slower. So these are running either in a Docker container or on the Mac stuff, they run it inside of a Vagrant VM. You can pay for faster machines, but still not quite as fast as if you're running it on dedicated hardware. It's not a whole lot slower, and it's stuff that you don't have to maintain. Either.
Parallelize for Flutter.
Yep.
Have an iOS and Android running in parallel, and that is a lot quicker.
Yeah, if you have if you get onto the paid plan, you can basically buy more concurrency, which then lets you can set up parallelization across your project. So you might have one worker out here running all of your tests, and another one actually going through and building your app, and another one doing something else. So then you end up cutting your actual release time down by a half or third. So for bigger apps or apps that have more tooling overhead, they make it pretty easy to support that too. Any other questions right now?
Who owns BitRise?
They're a company, so they're.
Are they a US-based company?
I'm not sure.
I think so. Just asking because you're giving them access to 100% of your code.
Yep. Yeah, you're.
Well, or whoever.
Mhm.
I mean, just saying.
It's a.
It's a lot of intellectual property going to it. That's why I'm asking.
Yep. You do have to put a lot of trust that they're keeping things secure and doing things right. And
So you mentioned earlier about the CLI version of this. So you basically reproduce this locally on your machine if you were doing like a Jenkins type of thing?
yeah. So if we go back over to here instead of our workflow tab, the tab that's over on the very far right is basically the project configuration. So this,
Configure gets written to that YAML file.
yep, and then you're able to grab this YAML file, keep it locally. I think you can also take the YAML file and add it to source control, and then as it checks out a project, it'll read that file in instead of this one. So this one is still working.
We also have an office.
So while this is doing that, so far the demo is going good, but we don't want to sit and watch a build. Every time you push to Google Play, Google is now running pre-launch reports for you. So if there's an issue with your application that Lint hasn't detected that Google can identify, they'll let you know. So there's definitely an advantage to pushing your builds up there as often as you possibly can. BitRise will go through and rebuild the images every week. Sometimes the caches, if you're pulling in new dependencies quicker than the cached or the build images get rebuilt, you may have to add in a script to go through and force like a Gradle update or something to make sure things are working the way they should. And if you ever want to get access to the machine that was built using that builds or software, you just need to troubleshoot this isn't working, what's on the file system, you can create a remote access build that'll last for 10 minutes after the end of the build, where you can just SSH into it, and it's just a regular Unix machine. You can create different workflows with different triggers. So looking at the workflow editor over here, we've got a primary workflow and a deploy workflow. You could have one set up to build and deploy a development version of your app, one set up to build and deploy a production version of your app, one that does a light run on stuff for merge requests or something. You can set up a bunch of different triggers based on pushing code, creating a pull request. If you push up a tag, you can trigger different workflows based on that. So you get a lot of flexibility into what gets run, where, and how. One of the downsides is if you're used to running espresso tests on a real device, and we were chatting about this earlier, because you are running on a virtual machine, you can't run the really fast Android emulators because you don't have hardware acceleration. So I haven't spent a whole lot of time digging into this yet, but you can use Firebase Test Lab to push the Android build that you created up to Google and let it run on their hardware. Again, haven't tested it. If for some reason your project has a build configuration that the steps that exist here just don't hit your needs, you can create your own and add it in. You just have to write it and go. And then we kind of ran into it earlier, but there's a lot of different steps out there. It covers most use cases that I've seen. So you should be able to get up and running pretty quickly. So let's see where this is at. Google Play deploy failed. Let's see. Failed to perform insert call. No application was found for the given package name. Let's see what's going on. Workflow. Deploy to Google Play. I am not seeing why it is not working. because my package is not about, it's about app. So I typed it in wrong. User error. Save it and rerun it. Not that I found. It'd be really awesome if they had that option to pick up where the build failed.
One step.
Yeah. But because they start you off with a clean VM every time.
Yeah. It's probably like part of a pipeline.
Yep.
That triggers the next one.
I think there's some things you can do if you want to pass things forward to like future workflows, but you have to decompose things a little bit more. So while this runs, and because that was the last step in our workflow, I think. Any questions? I'm going the wrong way.
So this is running off your local machine, your Mac right there.
Nope.
Oh,
This is running wherever they have their servers at.
so you were saying before that they have a Mac version of it or something? Is that a different service package?
Yeah. So in your project, you can set up under workflow. You can basically pick which type of virtual machine or container you want your application to run in. So for Android, you know, as long as you're not building on or running on a real device or a virtual device, everything fits inside of a Docker container. So they've got something for that. If you're building a Unity app, they've got the Visual Studio things set up here. And if you're building an iOS app, I mean, you got to manage, 8 different versions of Xcode. They keep a pretty good list of things that are out there.
Can you set up each build to use a different one?
Yeah, so if you have, like for some reason, you wanted your development in your primary stack to build on different machine types, yeah, you can do that. So you would just go down here to the workflow specific steps or workflow specific stacks and pick something else to override the default. But their defaults are pretty solid. And then they rebuild all of these images on a weekly basis with all the latest tooling and caches. So if you have an iOS project, they've got the latest CocoaPod repo already there. So if you're a week behind or within that week of something new coming out that you're trying to pull in, you're gonna have to do a pod update as part of a script. But only for that week. Let's see. This is still running.
Running on a free tier or you pay tier?
I'm demoing the free tier
Okay.
right now.
Find that enough for daily work? One developer?
For one developer, this would be sufficient. I'm paying for it for here because we've got more people using it and we need feedback quicker.
Which subscription are you on? Org Standard, Org Elite?
We're on Org Standard. So the difference between Org Standard and Org Elite is pretty much the type of build machine that you get. They've got normal build machines and they have faster ones.
What's the difference between the standard machine and the elite machine?
When I've tested it, about 20%.
20% faster?
Yep. So not enough for it to warrant the cost increase for me, but for other people, I can definitely see it being valuable.
And you're using it for Atomic Robot now?
Yep. Yep.
And are you hooking to sorry I got here late.
Mhm.
You may have said it already. Are you hooked to a GitHub repository?
Yep. So right up here.
Okay.
So then anytime I push up code here, it'll create a new build. We can even try that. So let's create a new file. We're going to call it readme.md. Hello, BitRise. So whenever I commit this file,
And you're committing it through the BitRise
I'm going to get through the GitHub editor right now, but it's the impact to the repository is the same. It's a new commit.
But that green button, was that part of the BitRise dashboard?
I know that's part of GitHub.
GitHub? I'm sorry.
Yep.
Couldn't quite see it.
So I should have a build queued up in here now. Yep, on hold. So they immediately picked up. Here's a new change, the new file. The free tier only gives you one concurrency at a time. Oh, hey, look at that. We have a green build. Our build passed. So it actually went through and pushed everything to Google Play and everything. This was build number 12. If I go back to the Google Play Developer Console and look at the internal track, I should see a new release out there with version 12. This is where the drum roll comes in. Internal test track, version code 12. So I did not have to run a Gradle script. I did not have to touch an APK file. I did not have to log into here. If I was on my team and wanted to test out the app, it'll give me an update that, hey, you've got a new version of this available in Google Play, and life is glorious and magical. So as long as you don't make the mistakes that I did earlier with forgetting what values to set up, it takes 15 minutes to get up and running.
Even if it takes you 3 hours, the time you'll save.
It'll, yep.
Yeah,
This is
quite a
like,
bit-
go ahead.
I was just gonna say there's quite a bit of knowledge in the initial setup, but yeah, the payoff is big.
Yep.
In their plan information, they mentioned the 2 concurrencies and 90-minute per. What is that?
So there's 2 different pricing models. One of them is if you have a small app that'll build in under 10 minutes, this will cover your needs. If your app gets bigger, that takes longer than 10 minutes, they want you to start paying a little bit of money because you're using more of their resources. And they only give you, one worker at a time.
Current build.
Yep. If you get bigger than that, you end up with organization plans. The code that we pushed up earlier should be building now because we're on the 1 concurrency. So in about 3 minutes, this will actually go through and push version 13 right up to Google Play. And we had to do nothing. And we know that our code builds and deploys.
In this
And
step, what did you do that triggered 13?
oh, so if you go into, if you make a change to your source code,
Oh,
and so we added a new file in earlier.
okay, that was a while ago.
Yep.
All right, so we just finished what we started.
Yeah. So let's edit this file. We'll keep a new one.
No, I saw it before, I got it.
And we'll save it,
I was just lagging by a version, but I got it.
commit the change. So our version control got updated, and they just went through and notified BitRise that there's a code change, and it's already queued it up for us.
That'll start 14.
Yep.
Okay, got it.
All with no effort on our side. Oh, 3 minutes. So if we jump back over here, refresh, version 13 should be in the Google Play console. And it is.
So when you were doing the initial slides, you were going through basically the different entry level requirements that you needed for the Google Play Store and for what you need for this tool. And so how did you figure all that out? Did you watch some?
Readmes, documentation, and just kind of working through that.
Okay. Yeah.
That's the same links that I included on the slides. So, and those will be available afterward too.
I love it.
It's
Just gotta be bits and nights to get through it.
it makes life pretty easy. Just knowing that you can keep chugging along and
Yeah.
that you've got basically an extra set of hands over here helping you.
So, the initial setup, you did, the final step was.
Any other questions?
How does this compare with some other tools or some other services along the same lines? I know Buddy Bill used to exist. I don't know, other tools that compare to
BitRise, I think, has the best experience in terms of being able to get up and running quickly, and their build agents are fast, which is something I don't think something at least I didn't see with Buddy Build before. But yeah, at the end of the day, they're all running the same scripts. You know, it's run this Gradle script to build an Android app. Run this script or call this API that Google exposes to deploy something to. There's some other services out there. This one just seems it fit our needs the best. So instead of us trying to juggle 3 or 4 different mobile CI systems, this one gave us the flexibility that we needed at the right price.
Yeah. So you were just like a 3-person company. Yeah. Card games or something.
That's all I have. And in about 30 seconds, we'll see version 14 up on Google Play.
Is it capable of tracking the level of changes in your code to see if it needs to do a full build? Or will it always do a full build?
It will always do a full build. Yep. So every time it runs, it starts off with a brand new clean environment that's isolated from everything else. So if you've been building locally, you may have installed some tool that you forgot about. And there's what's the saying? It works on my machine. This helps ensure that there's not something magical about your environment and your configuration required to release software. And now, at this point with this project, you could go months without ever needing to mess with the workflow again. You just come in here and look at the projects and the builds. I mentioned earlier that running all the tests. If I wanted, and lint reports. So if we want to see, what does linting think about our project? I'm targeting something with an old API, something with a full content backup. So, a few issues there. If we take a look at our app reports, it'll give you a report on all your how your unit tests passed.
I guess on the free tier, there was a limit of 10 minutes per build.
Yep.
So I assume that you have to build it before you run your unit tests. Or is there a way that
That's all included. Build.
Everything.
Yeah. If all of these workflow steps cumulatively take more than 10 minutes, you'll need to move up to a paid plan.
Okay, so in other words, you can't actually run one workflow to build it, another workflow to test it for 10 minutes each.
You could.
You're trying to run less expensive than
Yeah. I see what you're saying.
There's a 200 build limit on the free plan as well, though. If you're running into that 10-minute limit, there's like a per month you get 200 builds on the free plan. I think it's better.
So you're wanting to basically decompose all these steps into different workflows.
Yeah, because if you take 5 minutes to build and you want to run a test, assuming your tests are locked,
Mhm.
you have 6 minutes of test, then you're going over the 10-minute limit. But you did it in two steps or 2 workflows, or whatever.
Yeah.
Then you can't do that.
I'm not sure.
Or do you have to build it first and then run your tests? But it seems like you should run a clean environment.
Because
Yeah, I guess you can.
yeah, because the next thing that it comes through, it'll try to actually go through and rebuild everything again. So
So your scenario where there's 200, then if your developers are committing frequently, you're gonna blow past that pretty quick.
So-
Actually, but you could do it on pull requests, or there's lots of different ways you can do it. Like only on master develop, and you only merge into master develop, whatever.
So right now I have it set up to anytime code gets pushed up to trigger a build. If I wanted to be a little more selective, I could say on the develop, I want you to run the primary build, and on the master branch, I want to run the deploy workflow. So the developer one might actually go through the process of building and signing your app, but then never deploying it. The deploy workflow might do all of that plus deploying it.
So, like for example, where we are, we have two different flows. One of them, anytime anything is pushed into, or anytime anything is checked in, it will actually build and upload it to look at an internal test branch. Then from master, that gets actually pushed to what I think it's beta, but not deployed. Just pushed, not deployed.
It also have like a manual trigger.
Yeah, that's what we were using earlier. So if you go back to your workflows, or sorry, back to your project, you can do a start scheduled build. Like if I wanted to, let's say that this was a failing build for some reason, and I want to figure out what's going on, you can rebuild with remote access. And they give you the command to run that will log you into that SSH or into that container or virtual machine and the password. So let's try this. Terminal, run that. What's the password? So you can even see kind of in the background what they're doing. You know, this is the command that's going to be running our project using that same BitRise.yaml or BitRise YAML file that we looked at earlier that had our project configuration or our build configuration. Now if I look in here, it's already checked out the source code for my project. If it's modified something, so like our step that we had earlier that'll run later, we'll see if it's updating the manifest or what it's doing to set the version number to something different. But
This is running the build right now on your machine?
this, I'm SSH'd into one of their containers right now.
Okay.
So,
It was dynamically generated for this specific build.
yep. And so after this build finishes, they'll leave this container open for 10 minutes and then shut it down. So, you know, you're not going to be using this often, but if you're trying to troubleshoot something and need to see what exactly is happening.
Will it stay open longer if you were still using it, or is it always 10 minutes?
It's always 10 minutes. You know, it's kind of the grace period of, you know, getting there, figure out what you need, and then.
Well, some builds take longer than 10 minutes beyond the process.
Yeah, 10 minutes after the end of the build, no matter how it completes. That's all I have. You know, this is where we queued up something earlier. I think something changed that kicked off a new build. You can always go through and kill them off too. So if you know you don't want to run this one, just click into the queued build, hit abort, and it gets it out of your queue. And then now you can see what code changes happened and, you know, if the results of it. I love it. This is definitely one of the nicer CI/CD platforms that I've used.
The command line stuff at all?
I have not.
Do you have any clue what the architecture is for it, or you just know that it exists?
I know that it exists, and I've kept it in my back pocket for if I ever have a project that I need to.
Like you have a client who's like, we won't run stuff in the cloud, on-premise or something?
Yeah, either something like that, or if I have a project where I want to dedicate some of our hardware to it, because it's going to be a bigger, you know, I want to be able to, you know, re-leverage all of the tools and steps that they have in here in the configuration. but I haven't had that use case yet. So I know that it exists, but
Say that again. As far as you can't use the cloud, you need to use it on premise.
Well, that's why I was trying to figure out. So, like, it's a command line interface. Basically, you can write your own YAML file, which uses all of their internal infrastructure to do stuff, and then you just run it from command line. Or is it something where you're basically creating a worker that runs the build on your machine, and then you still control it from the web interface?
so it basically uses the project configuration to run all the same orchestration that they're running.
So you set it up by writing a YAML file, or
Yep.
you use okay.
Yep. They have a desktop editor for that workflow editor too, so you don't have to figure out what are all the right fields for this.
Yeah.
So you have to
No.
install jobs.
So all of our configuration fits into 121 lines of and looks like some of it's comments. So
A lot of that is like comments too. So
yep. Yeah, I could actually go through and oops. Yeah, I could go through and clean those up. Hmm?
Can you edit? Is that like an editor?
Yep.
Oh,
Hmm?
yeah, it is an
Yeah, see, it says you can download the YAML file and run it directly with BitRise.
If this is something that you'd rather have in version control, just so that you can see how people are, so that you can ensure that your build configuration isn't changing, just grab this file and put it in the root of your repository. And I'm pretty sure that this will override anything that they have set up actually in the console.
Is BitRise CLI a local install?
Yep.
So if I'm running in an aerospace and defense company behind a firewall, I can't use their cloud stuff.
Mm-hmm.
There's a downloadable installer for the CLI.
Yep. You'd have to use Homebrew and get Homebrew running through their talking to however from the outside, and then whatever they're using to pull down all of the steps, which are like their own little pieces of executable code. So you may have some work to do to get it working.
I understand. I'm trying to decide.
And you'd have to trigger it manually, right?
It would all depend on what version control system you're using
And I guess you
internally.
could probably set up your own, like if you had a on-premise
Yeah.
version control, you could set up a webhook on your machine or something.
Yeah.
My question is there an installable that makes it completely possible to run this behind the firewall? So you have a Git repository on your local network, and you've got
Oh. They have an on-premise option.
They do?
Is there like a different enterprise plan on the tab up there? Scroll a little more.
Oh, for enterprises.
Yeah, private cloud. Custom.
Let's try to get a box now. If it's a private cloud, it's
BitRise Enterprise.
If you give them enough money, they will.
well, not always. Salesforce.
I mean, it says optional under private cloud, so it says you have to work out a price with them. Essentially.
All right, thanks.
GDPR.
Yep.
I like that this is mobile first.
Yes. And I like how easy it is to get up and running. So we had basically our first build straight from code to release in 15 minutes.
There was a decent amount of, projects set up through as I recall, that's not trivial.
It only took 2 or 3 minutes if you know what screens to click.
Yeah. Every time I have to go in to set up something like that, they've changed it. since
Yep.
the last time I got there. I don't know my way through it yet. Just setting up authorization for,
If there's nothing else, it's Whiskey Wednesdays.